So it's been a month since Gervonta Tank Davis and Lamont Roach fought to a draw in Brooklyn, New York back on March 1st. And I went back and I rewatched this fight. One, because I was at the fight and I wasn't able to see everything. And two, was this a draw? Or should have one man that night got his hand raised with the decision? We know what the judges said. They said a majority draw. Two in favor of a draw and one actually in favor of Tank Davis, having him winning 7 rounds to 5. Was that the case? Or should Lamont Roach have gotten the decision? I think I have the answer. But first, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe this video. I'm Luke Backman. This is the Never Drop Podcast. And I was there that night in Brooklyn at the Barclays Center watching Tank versus Roach. A fight that, even watching back now, in the moment, I thought it was a really good fight. And watching it back, that was a good fight between the two. And before everybody already starts talking about it, yes, I believe the knee should have been a knockdown, but we're going to only talk about the things that happened in the fight and that were ruled in the fight, so the knee will not be counted as a knockdown when I'm talking about my rewatch, because, of course, in the fight, that wasn't the case. Again, you have no argument for me that the knee should have been a knockdown, but it wasn't called, so I'm not going to discuss it as what if, because if obviously it was, Lamont Roach would have been the victor in that fight, no doubt about it. But getting away from that and just looking at this fight, it was a really good fight. I just said that. It was a great fight between the two fighters, and there needs to be a rematch, no matter what. I don't care if one of those guys won. There should have been a rematch anyway. Here's my decision. I think it was a draw. I think it was a draw, and I'll talk about the rounds I think each fighter won. Obviously, I have them split 6-6, and I'll tell you, some of these rounds were incredible rounds with action that you just got to tip your hat to both fighters. So let's talk about the rounds, I think, each one. So for Tank Davis, I thought he won rounds 1, 3, 5, 6, 9, and 11. And I'll tell you this, round 11 was a tough one to judge. I think Tank might have gotten the better of Roach in that round by a punch or two, but it was razor thin, as a lot of these rounds were. And for Lamont Roach, obviously, I had him 2, 4, 7, 8, 10, 12. Again, a really good fight. And let's just talk about what I took away from each of these fighters. I want to talk about Lamont Roach first, because even myself and a lot of others included thought he was going to get knocked out in this fight. Lamont Roach, he stood in there and he traded with Tank Davis, and you got to give him props. He got hit by some shots, and definitely I think nothing didn't not hurt Lamont Roach, if that makes sense. These shots had an effect on Lamont Roach, but they weren't an effect that Tank's had on other opponents, like a Frank Martin, where he deviates from the game plan. Lamont Roach stuck to his game plan the entire fight. And even when he traded with Tank, he did so in a way where he wasn't at risk too much. Yes, he got hit with some clean shots, but his high guard also blocked a lot of these shots. His high guard blocked a lot of the shots and the power coming from the shots, where he wasn't getting hit flush every single time. I also thought it was interesting that Lamont picked it up the entire second half of the fight. If you would have watched those first 6 rounds, I thought Tank picked it up the end of round 3, and he got started earlier than a lot of people say he gets started. So I thought that was huge for Lamont Roach, because, again, I had it 4-2 in rounds after the 6th round. Lamont flipped that script, and really, I mean, if you look, it was really a tale of two halves in this fight. Tank was the better fighter in rounds 1-6. You're just wondering, you're like, all right, Tank's doing what he does. When's the knockout going to come? Lamont picked it up in the second half of the fight and stayed to the game plan. His short counters in the fight were incredible. That's where he buzzed Tank, and I thought he buzzed Tank 3 or 4 times to where Tank had to back off. He buzzed him 1-2 times still, like more that we've seen Tank necessarily get buzzed, and Tank had to take a step back, especially in, I believe it was the 7th round, where he was like, ooh, he kind of stumbled back and was like, oh, wait a second, and then props to Tank. Then he came back and he countered, and they got into a firefight. Again, I think round 7 was one of the best rounds I've seen in a while, especially in a Tank fight, and even round 9 after the knockdown. Round 9, such a crazy round. But round 7, Tank, I believe, got wobbled, and then it came back. They got back into it. Really good round, just as a boxing fan to watch. But Lamont, he stuck to his game plan, and the short counters, Tank was getting hit, and he wasn't seeing those punches. And that's why he was having to readjust. Lamont was really doing a great job in sneaking in those short counter punches. You can't load up, and they talked about it on the broadcast, don't load up the right hand because Tank can counter. Even Lamont would throw some good right hands and Tank wouldn't counter him. Lamont stuck to his game plan again. It's huge because not a lot of opponents against Tank stick to their game plan after they get hit like that. Lamont was able to. And on the flip side, I don't think Gervonta Davis had a game plan in this fight. That's really one of the main things I took away from this fight was I don't think Tank had a game plan. I think Tank was going in there just to fight, kind of like it was a sparring session. He was going in there to fight and thought his power was eventually going to get through and Lamont would open up and he'd be able to take advantage and knock Lamont out. I heard in the corner, Kenny Ellis. Again, I talked about the corner in my immediate review of the fight, the recap of the fight. I want Kenny and Calvin as the main two, and then Barry Hunter maybe as the second guy in there, not as it was Barry first and then Calvin and Kenny second, because Kenny puts a game plan together. The game plan was non-existent for Tank, I don't think. It was jab more, which again, it was fundamentals and you need to hear that in the corner. But I didn't see a game plan from Tank. I thought he was just in there and then it was like, oh, I'm in the middle, I'm in the inside. All right, I'm gonna just let my hands go. And he wasn't letting his hands go enough. Kenny Ellis was telling him, throw more combinations. And I forget which round it was. Tank threw a couple combinations and then he stopped. You got to throw a set of combinations, maybe take a step back and throw another set of combinations to keep Lamont on his feet, on his toes. Because Tank hit Lamont with some good shots. There was times I think Lamont felt those shots, like I mentioned earlier, but Tank wasn't capitalizing on those momentum and those opportunities. I think both fighters have room to grow in this fight, especially Tank. I think if Tank develops a game plan for the rematch, again, I favor Tank in a rematch. I think this was an off night for Tank. And again, his focus wasn't all there. It seemed like he was just going in there to fight. No game plan, just assumed he was going to get a knockout. I think this was a wake-up call. The rematch has to happen. It needs to happen. It was a wake-up call for Tank, and it's a do-or-die moment for Tank. He's heard all the criticism about who have you fought. Okay, now you have an opponent that's not going to allow you to just walk all over him. And Lamont's gone, and he's done his press run, and he's done everything he's supposed to after fighting that type of fight against Tank Davis. For Lamont, what is his game plan going to be for the next fight? Because you got to assume Tank's going to switch something up. Is Lamont going to try and start faster in this fight? Because he kind of let Tank bring the fight to him, which is interesting. A lot of people try and jump and steal those early rounds against Tank, and I think Tank is able to collect data faster. Tank was like, okay, you're not doing anything. I'll jump out in front and I'll start the action at the end of the third round. So what's Lamont and his father going to think and do in this rematch? Again, I think it was a really good fight. And if you think the fight went 7-5 and either way of the fighter, there's a few rounds that, okay, maybe we could flip. But I think a draw is the right conclusion. I think the draw was the right decision. Again, forget the knockdown, the knee that was taken. I think the draw was the right decision. Now, let's see what man is better when we get into this rematch. I think it's going to be another great fight, and it might just get started earlier. Both fighters got hit with some good shots, and we saw Tank, his defense was not as great as I've always thought it was. Again, maybe that's just being on the inside and getting into that firefight with Roach, but the defense wasn't incredible like I have always said it was. It's not a Shakur Stevenson level defense, but it's not far off. It's not 2 levels down, 2 tiers down. It's maybe a tier down. That wasn't the case March 1st in Brooklyn. Again, it was a great fight. I'm not mad at a draw. I think a draw, watching it back, 6 rounds to 6, I'm not mad at it at all. Let me know in the comments below, did you have this a draw? If not, I know a lot of you have said Lamont Roach won this fight. If you've gone back and rewatched this fight, let me know. Has your opinion changed? Has time changed your opinion? Do you think Lamont should have been the winner? And if so, do you think Lamont gets the job done in the rematch? Let me know who you have in the rematch. I'm Luke Backman. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe to the Never Drop podcast. I got all your boxing news, information going. Let me know in the comments below who you got in the rematch. That's all I got for you. Peace. I'm out.